They say you get what you pay for. But what if we told you there were cars so good the industry tried to silence them and pretend they never existed? Buckle up. Today, we're counting down 7 cheap cars that punched way above their weight. Number 7. Ford Probe. Imagine a world where the Ford Mustang was a front-wheel drive coupe built in Japan. Sounds like a horrible dream, right? Well, in the late 80s, Ford actually tried to make that happen, and that's how we almost ended up with the Ford Probe, the car that came dangerously close to replacing America's most iconic muscle car. The year was 1985. Gas prices were up. Japanese automakers were running circles around everyone, and Ford's executives were sweating bullets. The future, they thought, was all about fuel economy, aerodynamics, and global platforms. So they teamed up with Mazda to create a futuristic front-wheel drive sports coupe based on the Mazda 626. The result was the Ford Probe, a car that looked like a concept straight out of Blade Runner and handled like a proper Japanese tuner. It even had pop-up headlights and digital gauges. But here's the problem. Ford's marketing team decided to pitch it as the next Mustang, and Mustang fans did not take that well. In fact, they took it personally. Ford got thousands of angry letters from people who basically said, "Over my dead V8 body." And in no time, Ford got the message loud and clear. No replacement for displacement. They panicked, backed off the idea, and quickly reassured everyone, "Relax, the Mustang's not going anywhere." So instead, the Probe became Ford's other sporty car. The one nobody really asked for, but plenty of people actually bought. Surprisingly, it sold well at first, about 120,000 units in 1989 alone. And here's the kicker, it wasn't even bad. When it debuted in 1989, the Ford Probe came with either a 2.2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder or a 3.0-liter V6, depending on the trim. Then came the second generation in 1993, sleeker, curvier, and powered by a 2.5-liter V6, making around 164 horsepower. It was quicker, more refined, and handled far better than anyone expected. Thanks to its Mazda DNA. Even better, it was cheaper. In 1989, a fully loaded Probe GT cost around $16,500, while a Mustang GT would set you back about $17,500. So for less money, you got a sleek, futuristic coupe that could outcorner the Mustang. But despite all that, the Probe's biggest problem was identity. Ford never figured out who this car was for. Mustang fans hated it for not being a Mustang, and import fans didn't trust anything wearing a blue oval. By the mid-90s, the sports coupe market was collapsing. SUVs were the new hot thing, and Ford's focus had shifted to the Explorer and F-150. Probe sales plummeted from over 100,000 a year to barely 16,000, and by 1997, Ford quietly pulled the plug. Number 6. Nissan Sentra SERB13. Have you ever seen one of those cars that looks like it should be delivering pizza, but it's secretly out there handing out L's to sports cars? Yeah, that's the 1991 Nissan Sentra SER. It was the automotive version of Clark Kent. Awkward, boxy, wearing thick glasses. The funny part? Nissan didn't even mean to make it this good. They just took the most average-looking Sentra you could imagine and decided to give it an engine from the heavens. The SR20DE, a legendary 2.0-liter, twin-cam 4-cylinder making 140 horsepower and 132 pound-feet of torque. Doesn't sound crazy until you realize this thing weighed just 2,450 pounds. Translation? It moved. Like really, really fast. It did 0 to 60 in around 7.6 seconds, handled like a go-kart, and came with hardware that shouldn't have existed on something that cost $10,999. We're talking 4-wheel disc brakes, independent suspension, and, believe it or not, a factory viscous limited slip differential. That's the kind of stuff you didn't see in 1991 unless you were spending German money. Car and Driver called it one of the best cars in America, and even gave it a spot on their 1991 10 Best list. They also gave it a poor man's BMW M3 title, which sounds like an insult, but is actually one of the highest compliments you can give such a budget performance car. On a twisty road, the SER could hang with the big boy, and it did it all without a wing, without stickers, and without ego. But that was exactly the problem. It was too subtle. The SER looked identical to the regular Sentra your aunt used to buy. Buyers who wanted a sports car went for flashier Civics or Eclipses. The SER's stealth became its downfall, and Nissan quietly pulled the plug. And when they brought it back for the next generation, V14 in 1995, they ruined it. Out went the independent rear suspension, the limited slip differential, and the magic that made it special. Because apparently, making a car too good for its price tag is bad for business. Today, though, the B13 SER is a cult hero. That SR20DE engine is bulletproof. Tuners love it, drifters worship it, and clean examples now sell for over $30,000. Not bad for a car that once got mistaken for a rental. Number 5. BMW 318 Ti. You know those moments when a brand gets a little too confident? Like, we're BMW. We can sell anything. Well, in the mid-1990s, BMW decided to prove it. Their experiment was the 318 Ti, which many consider to be the ugliest BMW ever made. After all, the 1994 318 Ti was basically a 3 Series that got rear-ended by a designer's eraser. It had the front of an E36 3 Series sedan, but the back was chopped short like a mullet. In Europe, this thing was a hit. Young professionals, students, even delivery drivers loved it. It was affordable, sporty, and actually fun to drive. BMW figured if the Europeans love it, the Americans will too. But they were wrong. Painfully wrong. The 318 Ti arrived in the US as the 1995 model year, right when people wanted giant SUVs and muscle-bound trucks, not tiny German hatchbacks. And to make matters worse, BMW only gave it a 1.8-liter 4-cylinder engine at the start, making around 138 horsepower. But that shouldn't have mattered because you didn't buy a 318 Ti for straight-line speed. You bought it for that perfectly balanced rear-wheel drive handling. But try explaining perfect weight distribution to someone cross-shopping a Ford Explorer. BMW did try to fix it. In 1996, they swapped in a slightly larger 1.9-liter M44 engine. But by then, whatever little buzz the car had was gone. Inside, it wasn't exactly screaming luxury either. The interior felt stripped down, like BMW handed you 75% of a 3 Series and said, use your imagination. And while enthusiasts appreciated its driving dynamics, most buyers just couldn't get past the price of $19,000, which made it the cheapest BMW at the time. And because it was the cheapest BMW, it often got bought by people who just wanted the badge, not the driving experience. As a result, the 318 Ti flopped badly in America. Out of roughly 375,000 units made worldwide, less than 25,000 ever found homes in the US from 1995 to 2000. The 318 Ti didn't scream status symbol, it whispered practical fun, and that just didn't cut it in an era obsessed with big engines and bigger egos. But you know what? The 318 Ti was actually a misunderstood genius. It was light, simple, and pure. The kind of car BMW used to make before everything got turbocharged and touchscreen to death. That's why today, it is gaining a lot of traction and making enthusiasts look back and think, wait, this thing was kind of brilliant. Number 4. Ford Focus SVT. Have you ever seen a car so good it makes you question why nobody talks about it? Well, that's the Ford Focus SVT, the cheap hatch that could have been America's hot hatch hero if only people had noticed. Back in the early 2000s, Ford decided to prove they could make a killer hatch that didn't feel like a lunchbox with a wing, so they grabbed the regular Focus, which already handled surprisingly well, and then handed it to the mad scientists at Ford's special vehicle team. The result? A hatchback that punched way above its weight class, while wearing the friendliest little smiley face grille you've ever seen. And under the hood, you got a 2.0-liter Zetec 4-cylinder that Ford basically threw every spicy part at. A high-flow head, hotter cams, a dual-stage intake manifold, forged internals, the stuff tuners usually spend their entire paycheck on. Final output, 170 horsepower, revving all the way to 7,200 RPM. Doesn't sound like much today, but back then, this was the territory where you proudly bragged that my car screams like a Honda but handles like a Mini M3. And speaking of handling, the chassis was tighter, the suspension was stiffer, the brakes were bigger, and it came with a 6-speed Getrag manual transmission that made you feel like you actually mattered as a human being. No CVT sadness here. You could throw this car into corners like an irresponsible driver, and it would just laugh and encourage more bad decisions. And remember, we're still talking about a hatchback here, which came at a bargain price tag of $17,500 in 2002. Inside, you could get the European appearance package, which was basically Ford saying, hey, Want your Focus to feel like it wasn't built for cigarette burn discount rental fleets? You got leather Alcantara seats, cool wheels, HID headlights. Suddenly, this wasn't a cheap Econobox pretending to be sporty. This was legit. So why didn't it become a legend like the GTI or Civic Si? Timing, baby. In the US, hatchbacks at the time were like pineapple on pizza, extremely controversial and mostly misunderstood. Everyone wanted a Camaro, a Mustang, or some massive SUV that drank fuel like it hated money. A nimble front-wheel drive hatch that loved back roads more than drag strips just wasn't what America was into yet. But here's the thing. The Focus SVT aged like a fine wine. Today, car enthusiasts look back and go, wait, Ford made this? And suddenly people are hunting them down before they all rust into modern art installation. Unfortunately, only 7,500 units were sold in the US from 2002 to 2004. Before we reveal the final three, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts on the best forgotten cheap car we've mentioned so far. Number 3. Mazda Protege. Did you know Mazda once built a turbocharged sports sedan that challenged Honda Civic Siren, but forgot to tell anyone it existed? Yeah, it was called the Mazdaspeed Protege, and it's one of the most criminally overlooked performance cars of the time. It was the early 2000s, and every brand wanted in on the sport compact war. Subaru had the WRX, Mitsubishi had the Lancer Evo, Honda had the Civic Si, and Mazda, they had the Protege, which was launched in 1990. You know, the car your driving instructor used. But deep down, Mazda still had that zoom DNA. And someone in the office clearly had a death wish because they handed the Protege to Mazdaspeed, the same lunatics who tuned Miatas for track duty, and said, make it spicy. Well, they didn't add just a little spice. They dumped the whole bottle. How? Mazdaspeed bolted on a Garrett T25 turbocharger, gave it a freer-flowing exhaust, stiffer suspension tuned by Racing Beat, and 17-inch Racing Heart wheels. Suddenly, this economy car had 170 horsepower, a 5-speed manual, and a chassis so tight it made German engineers nervous. And it may have been front-wheel drive, but this thing had a trick up its sleeve, a racing-tuned limited-slip diff that kept torque steer in check and made cornering tighter than your jeans after Thanksgiving dinner. Understeer? Practically deleted from existence. And was it fast? Hell yes. It reached 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.9 seconds. But it wasn't about raw speed. It was about control, feel, and balance. The Mazdaspeed Protege was a masterclass in front-wheel drive dynamics, and it made you grin like a kid with a new bike every time you took a corner. Oh, and when it came to the visual appeal, Mazda made sure you wouldn't mistake it for a base model. The car got a more aggressive body kit, rear spoiler, and exclusive paint options like spicy orange mica, which sounded like a hot sauce and looked just as fiery. Inside, the upgrades continued. Sport seats, aluminum pedals, and a sweet-sounding Kenwood audio system that was high-tech for its time. But here's where it all went wrong. Nobody knew it existed. Seriously, Mazda basically forgot or didn't care about marketing it. There were no flashy commercials, no press hype, no magazine spreads showing it carving mountain roads. The Mazdaspeed Protege just quietly appeared at dealerships as the 2003 model year with a price tag of $19,500, usually sitting next to a beige MPV minivan or a base Protege with plastic wheel covers. Salespeople often didn't even know what they were looking at. In the end, Mazda sold just over 4,500 of them in the US and discontinued it after the 2003 model year, making it rarer than a clean RX-7. It never had the fame of the WRX or EVO, but it laid the groundwork for something even better, the Mazdaspeed 3 that came just a few years later. Number 2. Pontiac Vibe GT. Imagine walking into a Pontiac dealership in the early 2000s. On one side, you've got a Pontiac Aztek, a car so ugly it looked like it was designed by a committee that hated each other. On the other, a little hatchback that looked like it was made for people whose idea of fun was going grocery shopping. That was the Pontiac Vibe GT, the unassuming little hatchback that could scream to 8,000 RPM and outrun half the sport compacts of its time. The Vibe GT launched in 2003 with a price tag of around $19,000, but by then, Pontiac was creatively confused. Their marketing slogan proudly declared, "We build excitement," but most buyers agreed they mostly built depreciation. So GM called up Toyota and said, listen, we need something reliable, affordable, and maybe, just maybe, not a total embarrassment. Toyota, being Toyota, handed them a blueprint for the Matrix and said, don't mess this up. Pontiac miraculously didn't. In fact, they might have improved it, at least for people who love driving. Under the hood of the Vibe GT sat the 2ZZ-GE engine, a 1.8-liter four-cylinder masterpiece from Toyota's Celica GTS. It made 180 horsepower and screamed to 8,200 RPM, and if you've never heard one of these hit full throttle, it sounds like a blender having a spiritual awakening. Moreover, it had a 6-speed manual, sharp handling, and that magical Toyota reliability, all wrapped in a Pontiac badge that confused everyone. The suspension was tuned for real driving fun. It weighed under 2,900 pounds. And it had more cargo space than it had any right to. On paper, it was the perfect enthusiast daily. Fast, practical, and bulletproof. It had all the ingredients for greatness. But this is Pontiac we're talking about. And Pontiac, bless its chaotic heart, couldn't sell a bottle of water in a desert if it didn't have fake hood scoops on it. Instead of marketing it as a screaming, high-revving hot hatch that could hang with a civic sign, they went with lifestyle ads. People playing frisbee, surfboards, taglines like fuel for the soul. It was like they built a car for adrenaline junkies and then tried to sell it to yoga instructors. In the end, everyone thought it was just another rebadged Econobox. Eventually, all Vibe models, including the GT, were discontinued in 2009, becoming one of the most underrated driver's cars of that era. Number 1. Acura RSX. Did you know Acura once tried to replace one of the most beloved tuner cars of all time, and everyone booed before even driving it? That's the story of the Acura RSX, a car born into expectations so high you'd think it was taking the SATs the day it rolled off the assembly line. Here's the thing, for years we had the Integra, a car so outrageously good it practically invented the my economy car is faster than your sports car culture. The Integra Type R was a front-wheel drive superhero. It raced, it won, it revved to the moon, and it did all that while being a Honda. People loved this car, like tattooed it on their forearm, loved it. So when 2001 rolled around and Acura suddenly said, "Yeah, we're killing the Integra name," tuner culture collectively entered the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then just sitting in the garage thinking, surely they cannot replace such a legend. So what did Acura bring in to replace it? A car called the RSX, which, let's be honest, sounded like something you'd use to reset your Wi-Fi router. The entire tuner community collectively went, I'm sorry, what now? Behind the scenes though, Acura had a plan. The auto brand desperately wanted to grow up. They looked over at Lexus and Infiniti living their best lives with premium sedans and rear-wheel drive swagger and thought, we need to get fancy too. So they took the 7th gen Civic platform, stiffened the suspension, wrapped the interior in leather, added sound deadening to make it quieter, and slapped a new badge on it. The message was clear. This isn't your high-revving street racer anymore. This is a gentleman's sport compact. The RSX came in 2 flavors. Base model, which was good, but you felt like you were driving the substitute teacher of Hondas. The other one was the Type S. The real reason this car is legendary, it's because under the hood sat the K20A2, a 2.0-liter 4-cylinder that produced 200 horsepower and 8,000 plus RPM of screaming VTEC chaos. This engine was so good that the entire car world basically said, we'll take that thanks, and started ripping K-series motors out of wrecked RSX like crazed organ thief. In case you want more, here are the hard numbers. 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 6.7 seconds. Red line of 7,900 RPM and handling revolved around pure front drive magic. Oh, and the transmission involved a 6-speed manual that felt like Acura hired a katana-sharp samurai to tune every single shift. Unfortunately, when the RSX landed in America, the timing couldn't have been worse. Gas was cheap, pickup trucks were suddenly lifestyle vehicles, SUVs had become suburban status symbols, and horsepower was the name of the game. Everyone wanted to be big, loud, and thirsty. So Acura brought in this sleek Japanese hatch coupe thing that cornered like a ballerina and revved like an F1 car. And Americans replied, does it tow a boat though? Between 2002 and 2006, Acura sold just over 130,000 units in the US. Not bad, but not enough to save it. The RSX quietly disappeared after 2006. Replaced by a turbo Civic Sight and a generation that traded VTEC screams for touchscreen beeps. We hope you enjoyed this video. Here's another one you'll love. As always, thanks for watching.